The house stood on a hill, majestically overlooking the town. It was a grand Victorian mansion, full of charm, elegance, and history. The Harper family fell in love with it instantly. John, Sarah, and their two children, Lily and David, were excited to start a new chapter in their lives. The house was perfect for them. It was their ultimate dream home. The family quickly settled in comfortably. They unpacked boxes and arranged their furniture. Laughter filled the rooms as they made the house their own. Little did they know, a darkness lingered beneath the surface. Something sinister watched them from the shadows. Their dream home was about to become a living nightmare. The whispers grew louder, more frequent. They seemed to echo through the hallways, bouncing off the walls and creating an eerie symphony that sent shivers down the spine. It was as if the house itself was alive, breathing and speaking in hushed tones. They seemed to come from the walls themselves. The very structure of the house appeared to be whispering secrets, secrets that were not meant for human ears. The shadows danced and flickered, creating shapes that seemed almost sentient. The Harpers brushed it off as their imaginations. They laughed it away, attributing the strange occurrences to the quirks of an old house. After all, old houses had their own personalities, didn't they? They creaked and groaned, and sometimes they whispered. They were still getting used to the old house, they told themselves. Moving into a new place always came with its own set of challenges. Unpacking boxes, finding the right spots for their belongings, and adjusting to the new environment. It was all part of the process. But deep down, a seed of unease had been planted. It was a small, almost imperceptible feeling at first, but it grew with each passing day. The whispers, the shadows, the strange occurrences, they all contributed to a growing sense of dread. One evening, as John sat reading in the study, he heard a loud bang from upstairs. It was a sudden jarring noise that broke the silence of the night. His heart skipped a beat and he felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He rushed to investigate, his heart pounding in his chest. The stairs creaked under his weight as he ascended, each step echoing in the stillness. He clutched a flashlight in his hand, its beam cutting through the darkness. He checked every room, but found nothing. The rooms were empty, silent, as if mocking his fear. He stood in the hallway, breathing heavily, trying to make sense of what he had heard. Just the house settling, he muttered to himself. He tried to convince himself that it was nothing, just the natural sounds of an old house. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. But the sound had been too distinct, too deliberate. It was as if someone, or something, had intentionally tried to startle him. The thought sent a chill down his spine. It was like something had intentionally tried to startle him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that there was something lurking in the shadows, just out of sight. The shadows seemed to deepen, stretching out like claws. Objects moved inexplicably. A chair that had been neatly tucked under the table was now askew. A picture frame that had hung straight was now tilted. A vase Sarah swore she placed on the mantelpiece was now on the coffee table. She stared at it, her mind racing to find a logical explanation. Had she moved it and forgotten? Or was there something more sinister at play? A book John left on his nightstand was found in the bathtub. He picked it up, bewildered. How had it gotten there? He was certain he hadn't moved it. The incidents were becoming too frequent to ignore. Fear began to creep into their hearts, replacing the initial joy they had felt. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The house that had once seemed charming and full of character now felt ominous and foreboding. The Harpers couldn't deny it any longer. There was something in the house with them, something that didn't want them there. One night, young Lily woke up screaming. Her voice pierced the stillness of the night, echoing through the quiet house. It was a scream filled with pure terror, the kind that sends chills down your spine and makes your heart race. Her parents, John and Sarah, rushed to her room, their hearts racing with worry. They had never heard Lily scream like that before. It was as if she had seen something truly horrifying. Lily was trembling, her eyes wide with terror. She clutched her blanket tightly, as if it could protect her from whatever she had seen. Her small body shook uncontrollably, and tears streamed down her face. "The man in the hat!" she cried, pointing to the dark corner of her room. "He was watching me!" Her voice was filled with fear and desperation, and her parents could see the genuine terror in her eyes. John and Sarah searched the room, their hearts pounding. They looked under the bed, in the closet, and behind the curtains, but found nothing. The room was empty, just as it had been when they put Lily to bed. They tried to calm Lily, assuring her it was just a bad dream. They hugged her tightly, whispering soothing words and telling her that there was no one there. But Lily's fear was palpable, and it was clear that she truly believed she had seen something. but Lily was adamant. She had seen the man. She described him in detail, her voice trembling with fear. He was tall and thin, wearing a long black coat and a top hat, she said, her eyes wide with terror. He was tall and thin, wearing a long black coat and a top hat. His presence was menacing, and even though his face was hidden in the shadows, Lily could feel his cold, piercing gaze. It was as if he was looking right through her, seeing into her very soul. His face was hidden in the shadows, but Lily could feel his cold, piercing gaze. It was a gaze that seemed to penetrate the darkness, reaching out to her with an icy grip. She could still feel the chill of his stare, even though he was no longer there. John and Sarah exchanged worried glances. They had never seen Lily so frightened before. She had always been a brave child, rarely scared by anything. But this was different. This was real fear, and it was clear that something had truly terrified her. They couldn't shake off Lily's fear. She had never been prone to nightmares. In fact, she rarely had bad dreams at all. But this was different. This was something that had shaken her to her core, and they couldn't ignore it. And there was something about her description of the man that sent chills down their spines. It was too detailed, too vivid to be just a figment of her imagination. The way she described his cold, piercing gaze and his menacing presence made their skin crawl. He sounded like something out of a ghost story. The kind of figure that haunts your dreams and makes you afraid to close your eyes at night. The kind of figure that lingers in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Harpers tried to dismiss it as a child's imagination, but doubt lingered in their minds. They wanted to believe that it was just a bad dream, but the fear in Lily's eyes was too real to ignore. They couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. They couldn't escape the feeling that something sinister was lurking in the shadows of their home. The darkness seemed to hold secrets, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. It was as if the very house itself was alive, watching and waiting. The unsettling events continued. The Harpers had always considered their home a sanctuary, a place of comfort and safety, but now it had transformed into a realm of fear and uncertainty. The once familiar creaks and groans of the old house now seemed sinister, as if the very walls were whispering secrets. David, the older and usually skeptical son, claimed to have seen a shadowy figure darting across the hallway. He had always prided himself on his rationality, often dismissing his younger sister Lily's tales of ghosts and ghouls as mere figments of her imagination. But this time, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He described it as tall and slender, just like Lily had. The figure's movements were swift and almost otherworldly, leaving David with a sense of dread that he couldn't easily dismiss. It was as if the shadow had a life of its own, moving with a purpose that was both terrifying and inexplicable. The figure vanished before David could get a clear look, leaving him shaken and confused. He stood there, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what he had just witnessed. The hallway, now empty, seemed to mock him with its silence, as if daring him to question his own sanity. He couldn't explain what he had seen, but he knew it was not his imagination. The experience left him with a lingering sense of unease, a feeling that something malevolent was lurking just out of sight. He tried to convince himself that it was just a trick of the light, but deep down, he knew better. Their once peaceful home was now a source of constant dread. The Harpers found themselves on edge, jumping at every little noise and shadow. The house, which had once been filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and unwelcoming. It was as if the very essence of the home had changed, becoming a place of fear and uncertainty. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the windows sent shivers down their spines. The familiar sounds of the house had taken on a new, sinister quality, making it impossible for the family to relax. They found themselves constantly on high alert, their nerves frayed by the relentless onslaught of unexplained phenomena. The Harpers were living on edge, their nerves frayed by the relentless onslaught of unexplained phenomena. They tried to go about their daily lives, but the sense of dread was always there, lurking in the background. It was as if the house itself was alive, watching and waiting for the next opportunity to strike. They tried to rationalize their experiences, to find logical explanations for the strange events, but deep down, they knew something was terribly wrong. The family would gather in the living room, discussing their encounters in hushed tones, each story more unsettling than the last. They wanted to believe that there was a reasonable explanation, but the evidence was mounting against them. One night, John awoke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. The sound was unmistakable, a slow and deliberate pacing that sent chills down his spine. He lay there, frozen in fear, listening as the footsteps grew closer and closer. It was as if someone or something was making its way towards his room with a purpose. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The fear was palpable, a cold, creeping sensation that seemed to paralyze him. He wanted to call out, to wake his wife, but the words caught in his throat. All he could do was lie there, listening to the approaching footsteps, his mind racing with possibilities. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, coming closer to his room. Each step seemed to echo through the house, amplifying the sense of dread that had taken hold of him. He could feel the presence drawing nearer, the air growing colder with each passing second. It was as if the very atmosphere was charged with a malevolent energy. John grabbed his flashlight and crept towards the door, his hand trembling as he reached for the doorknob. He knew he had to confront whatever was out there, but the fear was almost overwhelming. With a deep breath, he turned the knob and slowly opened the door, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness as he stepped into the hallway.